Lecture 8, Interaction of Fiscal Policy and Monetary Policy, Part 3, the combination of fiscal policy and monetary policy. First of all, we will recall the effects of fiscal policy and monetary on demand. So you can see that the effect of monetary policy on demand is taken through the money transmission mechanism, and the effect of fiscal policy on aggregate demand is two effects: the multiplier effect and the crowding out effect. First of all, when we analyze the effect of monetary policy, we should use the monetary transmission mechanism with the four diagram. And in this section, the first changes happen in money market when we have, for example, an increase in money supply. This is the expansionary monetary policy. The increase in money supply leads to the reduction in interest rate and then increase investment. The increase in investment will lead to increase in aggregate expenditure and also the aggregate demand. So finally, we have the increase in demand when there is the expansionary monetary policy. The result for tightening or contractionary monetary policy is vice versa. When we reduce money supply, so finally, aggregate demand reduces and shifts to the left. So now we can see that the effect of monetary policy on aggregate demand, so it will lead to the change in the price and GDP, but it also leads to the changes of interest rate. So there are many objectives of monetary policy. Sometimes the central bank wants to maintain the stability of the interest rate, but also want to stabilize, increase or reduce aggregate demand. So in that case, we will use the monetary policy to maintain or to stabilize interest rate, and use fiscal policy to stabilize aggregate demand. So now for the fiscal policy. The fiscal policy has two effects on aggregate demand. Firstly, is the multiplier effect. It will lead to the change in aggregate demand and output m times higher than the first change in government spending or tax. Or the second effect is crowding out effect. When there is changes to money demand, it leads to the change in the interest rate and investment, and it causes the crowding out of investment and investment and consumption. So it will lead to the reverse change in GDP. So with the diagram, we can see that if we increase government spending, and so it will lead to the increase in aggregate expenditure. So we have the new equilibrium in the markets. And this is the increase in aggregate demand with the multiplier effect. The changes in aggregate demand is m times higher than the changes in initial government spending. So after we have the increase in aggregate demand, this will lead to the change require more money. the change in money demand. And so, in the money market, with the available money supply, interest rate increase because of the shortage of money. And the increase in interest rate will lead to the reduction in investment. This is the crowding out of investment. And at the same time, when interest rate is higher, so households want to save more and reduce their consumption. So the crowding out effect mentioned both the reduction in investment and the reduction in consumption. So now, we have the reduction in aggregate expenditure and aggregate demand. So this is the crowding out effect. So we can see that the final result for the fiscal policy is the increase of ID from the blue line to the yellow line, not the red one. So there's a question that, can we use monetary policy together with the fiscal policy in order to avoid the ineffectiveness of the policy, or it is exactly to avoid the crowding out effect? Now please look at the money market. If we combine the expansionary monetary policy here, so the increase in money supply will satisfy the shortage of money in the markets. So if the shortage of money is now satisfied, so there will be no change in interest rate. And no change in interest rate will lead to no crowding out effect. And we don't have the reduction of AD and AE. And maintain the multiplier effect. So this is the one way of combination between fiscal policy and monetary policy. In fact, we may mention about many other combinations of the two policies. In fact, we may combine expansionary fiscal policy and expansionary monetary policy like this. So in this diagram, we show the expansionary fiscal policy to increase government spending, and then expansionary monetary policy to increase money supply. Another way to combine the two policies is contractionary or tightening, contractionary fiscal policy and contractionary monetary policy. And the effect of this combination is similar to the combination of expansionary policy, but in the reverse result. And in fact, we can also combine the expansionary fiscal policy with contractionary monetary policy, or vice versa, contractionary fiscal policy and expansionary monetary policy. So in fact, there are four combinations. There are four combinations between the two policies. It depends on our objective of policy. So now you can see that, in fact, because of the disadvantage of the policy, so we should use the combination of policy in order to avoid the disadvantage. The data show that when we increase government spending, and increase the share of government spending in GDP, the share of consumption is lower. And at the same time, the share of investment also be lower. So this is the crowding out effect, and is a very serious problem for the policy. And we often combine the monetary policy to avoid the crowding out effect. The combination of the two policies will also help to avoid the limitation of the fiscal policy. For example, there are many lags of the launching the policy. And in fact, there are two types of lags. The first type of lags is the inside lag. It means that it takes time to formulate a policy after they perceive the recession. And next, outside lags. It refers to the fact that it takes time for the policy to actually work. So now we can imagine there are 4 periods of lags in launching a policy. First of all, when GDP is lower than the potential level or the full employment level, GDP is lower. So from this point of time, to formulate the policy, it takes time. To formulate the policy, the expansionary fiscal policy, to increase GDP and stabilize GDP back to the full employment GDP. And next, when they formulate the policy, the changes in AD also lead to the changes in inflation. And so it takes time for the economy to increase GDP. But in fact, the economy is also be self-stabilized. So maybe the increase of GDP is higher than expected, and it becomes booming. Or the economy fall into the inflationary pressure. And so from this point, there is the perception of the inflationary pressure, and they formulate another policy to stabilize the economy, contractionary fiscal policy. And when the policy go into action, the policy go into action is at the same time of the stabilization of the economy. The economy is also self-stabilized, and it may under-stabilize the economy. And so the economy may reduce too much and become lower than the full employment GDP. So now we can see that because of the lag, the effect of fiscal policy seems to be lower. And in order to keep the policy go just in time, we need to combine the two policies to quickly remove or quickly stabilize GDP back to the full employment level. Okay, so now you may suggest many other type of combination between the two policies. And remember that any combination must think of the disadvantage of the policy. And the meaning of the combination is to avoid the disadvantage of the policy. So now, please have some exercise to practice for the combination between the two policies. This is the end for this lecture. This is the end for Lecture 8, Fiscal Policy and Monetary Policy, Part 3, the combination of the two policies.